Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. It's Jen Ross. Welcome to the Agritourist Podcast. This is our WWOOF Part 2 podcast with Pattie Baker. Pattie is the author of Round America with a Duck, where she traveled across America right before her 60th birthday via bike, buses, trains, and woofing. And if you want to learn more about woofing, catch episode 19 from last week. Pattie's book really moved me. Her adventure was full of lots of learning, inspiring moments, such interesting people and places, and a few exciting and very scary experiences. But most of all, Pattie's journey was full of powerful life lessons. Before we launch into my meaningful conversation with Pattie, I will start with an important quote from her book. My journey round America with a duck was hard. It took a certain kind of person and a certain kind of attitude, plus a willingness to change, to pivot, to trust the journey. Believing I can do this was the bare minimum for achieving it, and anyone who says they can't really truly can't. If you're thinking, well, maybe I can, then it's for you. It's that maybe where the magic lives. Enjoy my conversation with Pattie Baker. Oh, nice setting. I like it.
I know. It was like, well, it gets so hot here still. And I have to water the food pantry garden. And so I was like, okay. And then all the landscapers start in my neighborhood. So I was like, that's going to be loud if I sit outside there. So let me just see if I can pop over to the park. Are those birds?
No, it's actually really nice.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes I drove people crazy, not crazy in a bad way, but I think it was good. When I was working with Alaska, I had a job with Alaska remotely, and it was like through their dark of dark, and like the dogwoods are blooming, and I'm sitting outside having these Zoom calls,
and they're all gloomy.
I know. I said, "Is this good or bad?" And they're like, "No, it's good. It's good." So, anyway, excellent. I'm so happy to meet you. First of all, I didn't see your last text or email, so that's awesome about your daughter and her major. I mean, that wasn't even available to us, as an option.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I want to talk to you all about, because we have a lot of a little bit in common there. And when they mentioned you, when I spoke to Jenna, I interviewed Jenna on WWOOF, and I found out about WWOOF when I was in the island of Grenada on a cacao farm, and they're like, oh, there was another cabin like above where we were. Right. And they were like, oh, those are the woofers. And I'm like, the what? This was a bunch of years ago. I had so that they explained it to me. And then I always had it in the back of my mind, like, oh, that's so cool. And there were a lot of younger people. So,
right. Yeah, mostly, almost all. Yeah.
Yes. So when I started doing, with a focus on agritourism, I'm like, boy, what a great way to really, what a great agritourism opportunity. I mean, I know, a lot of people don't have the income source to go to some of these really nice, expensive places, but this is such a great opportunity for people to really learn and get educated and see and travel. So I thought it was just great. So when I was interviewing Jenna at the very end of the conversation, she mentioned you because I had said that, oh, I would love to do this when my youngest, who's now 17, she'll be graduating this May, graduates. This is something I would be interested in doing. And she's like, oh, you need, to talk to Pattie Baker. And I was just like, so when she mentioned your book, I did read the book. I have it here.
Oh, yeah, what'd you think?
I finished it, Round America with a Duck. I loved it. And I actually have 4 pages of notes just some things I wanted to kind of go over from the book that obviously are beyond the WWOOF experience, but the WWOOF experience obviously gave you that opportunity to explore. But first, I have a question to start us out. Do you feel hope right now?
Yeah, I feel a lot of hope. I feel hope every single day, because every single day, if I start it with that attitude and that belief, it manifests. It manifests. Something good absolutely always happens every day. And there's always just signs of hope. And I think being agriculture folks, again, I always go back to that seed. Right now I'm about to leave for my next journey, for the sequel to the book. And I have planted the fall cover crop a little bit early because I wanted to help it to germinate and to tend it for a few weeks before I left. And I'm involved with the food pantry garden and my home garden and a sharing garden, blah, blah, blah. And it's all up. Like, it shouldn't be up, and it's up, and I've been taking good care of it, and folks have been helping. And, every time you see a seed germinate like that, that gives me so much hope.
Exactly.
I guess it's actually as simple as the seed. It really is.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you probably feel that too. I mean, you've done so much, in the community. I've been listening to all your podcasts, and thank you so much for shining a light on so many people and such diverse experiences, what people are doing, and yourself, and your incredible background and your community involvement and commitment, to the caring of the earth and teaching, especially about it.
Yeah, it's a passion in me that sometimes you're like, oh, just go get a job or go do this. And then it always like creeps back and it doesn't allow you. It just kind of keeps pulling me back. So I started the podcast as a creative opportunity for myself to get back integrated into the community, because it's not that I've been out of it, but I haven't been intimately involved with it. And I was, when I had the farm and I was doing so much, and then I pulled myself out a bit. And then this is just, the people that, and the thing is, I'm not just learning about agritourism and farming. There's so many life lessons, as your book portrays. There's so many love lessons. There's just so much that I'm getting out of this experience that is way beyond farming and agriculture, but maybe that's what farming and agriculture really represent. So it's just an interesting thing that's unfolding here. So I want to go back. Are you from Long Island?
Yeah, I grew up in Mineola, Long Island. So yeah, my dad worked in Manhattan my whole life. And, that's where I moved after college. Yeah. I mean, where I'm from. Although I've been in Atlanta, Georgia. We moved down here I came down the end of 1989. So a couple of years ago. I've actually been here longer than I've been up there, but always in New York. Always in.
So you grew up here, and then you went, I know you started at a different school, and then you ended up at SUNY State University of New York at Geneseo,
right?
Correct?
Yes.
So what did you study in Geneseo? And I guess.
I know. Well, I was an English major, and I think I studied ping pong in the laundry room more than anything else. Yeah, I was an English major, and I did photography, I did journalism, all those kinds of things. And then I moved down to New York City and pursued a career in those marketing communications. I had a marketing communications and writing career for many years. So
Okay.
in New York and then here in Atlanta.
And where did you meet your husband?
I met him on a blind date in New York. It's actually my pledge mistress from Geneseo. Worked with him as a special agent in New York City for the U.S. Treasury. And uh, I used to ride my bike past her apartment and ring my bell all the time. And one day she said, I've got this coworker I think you would like. And we actually met on a blind date and got engaged 6 weeks later.
Oh,
So yeah,
wow.
it'll be 35 years coming up soon.
Congratulations. Oh my
So
God,
yeah.
that's so funny. All right. So, okay, Geneseo obviously is a lot of farmland. Like
Mhm.
I want to talk to you about where the biking came from and where the love of plants
Right.
and seeds and
Yeah.
agriculture came from. So talk to me a little bit about both of those things.
Well, I see you're trying to connect Geneseo to the farm thing, but that's not where it happened. I would say it happened in two places. Three. One, my grandmother was from Ireland and she always had a little garden. So I was always really interested in that. She lived in New Jersey. We went there a lot. And second, we had these neighbors that moved in from Brooklyn. They were Italian and they moved in next door and they turned their entire yard into a garden, a vegetable garden. And this blew my mind. Like, I did not know this was an option. So that was super exciting. And then the biggest one was probably I had this part-time job at Wallbaum's supermarket after I, moved on from McDonald's. When you got to be 17, you could go to the supermarket to work as a cashier.
I worked at
So,
Wallbombs
oh, did you really?
in the deli.
Oh, that was like the elite. I wasn't. I wasn't like experienced enough for the deli. But what I loved as a cashier was I really wasn't that familiar with a wide variety of fruits and vegetables beyond, what we had at home. And folks would just buy the most interesting things. And of course, I didn't know what things were. And you had to know the little lookup code for every single thing. And so I would get into these big conversations with the customers and say, what are you doing with this? And what is this? And, what, when is this ripe? And how do you tell? And we had so many exciting conversations. And that just opened my eyes to there was a whole world I didn't know about. I would say that. I mean, I always loved animals and being outdoors and things. So I don't know. It all comes together. I mean, we all end up here somehow. And when we look back, all the dots connect. I mean, that's where trusting the journey really does play out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you and your husband made a decision to move to Georgia. What was
Yeah.
that about?
Yeah. Well, we moved to Atlanta. We wanted to go. He was about to go to law school for several years. And we both were native New Yorkers. We were living in Manhattan and I was working at USA Today and he was a special agent. And we were just kind of looking for somewhere that wasn't that far away, that was artistic, culturally interesting, different. And we came down and visited, and I had gotten a job with CNN at Turner Broadcasting. So in the midst of, that job search. So we said, let's just go for a couple of years and see what happens. So here we are. Turns out it has a really, really, really long growing season. It's hard to leave. It's a really, really, really good climate for agriculture,
Oh yeah,
urban
absolutely.
farming, and it's really robust. It's for folks who haven't been to Atlanta. It's a mecca for so many things, artistically, culturally, business wise, and it's a really wonderful place to ride a bike and grow food and raise a family. So we've really loved it. A lot of people from all over here, so it's very, very diverse.
Excellent. So tell me
Yeah.
about the biking.
Well, the bike. I mean, you grew up on Long Island. I mean, did you grow up biking?
Yes, as a kid, that's what we did. We got on our bike and we went all over the place on our bike
Right.
and I've done triathlons, so I've done that type of
Oh,
biking
that's
too.
awesome.
But it can, look, I see a lot of efforts around bike lanes and stuff like that now, but I also see a lot of people distracted driving. So most of my friends who do triathlons, it's part of the rite of passage that you tend to get hit at some point
Mhm.
or have some type of accident. So I don't bike as much as I
Right.
would prefer.
Yeah.
But Yeah. So I guess you grew up on a bike.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on a bike and I really never got off it. I It's just always my preferred mode of transportation. I'm not a sports cyclist. And I mean, maybe one day that'll be a phase as well, but I'm really not a sports cyclist. I don't particularly like speed. I don't like to really compete, with other folks. And I just really love the freedom of going places on my bike. So I just really love it. And I always have, and I've kind of always sought it out. But I've definitely had times when I've ridden much less because of the dangers. And of course, things have definitely changed since we were kids with the larger vehicles and the increased distractions. And I am a road violence survivor. So I was the victim of a hit and run the first summer of COVID.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah. So, I'm also a league cycling instructor with the League of American Bicyclists. So, there are a ton of things that folks can do to reduce or eliminate a lot of the risks. And of course, trying to, choosing safe routes or searching out safe routes. And when you combine it with bikes and with buses and trains, you really have a lot more accessibility than you may realize because you can go other places
Right.
and put yourself in a situation that positions you for success.
Right.
And especially women. Women have different situations and circumstances that aren't represented often at City Hall. We're harassed more. We're close past more often. Isolated woods are more dangerous. Things. Although I'm very close to a lot of people, so right now in the woods. And I actually choose this place. People say, "Why are you so close to the parking lot?" or "Why are you so close to the road when you go on your hammock at the park?" And I'm like, I got my reasons.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't blame
So,
you.
I mean, I think being aware of the reality and trusting your gut, and then making a collection of decisions that position you for success do make it possible. I mean, I'm not planning on stopping anytime soon.
Yeah. So So you said you were at CNN. Like, where did you, because I know you've had some interesting opportunities along the way. I'll call them opportunities. And I know you mentioned in one of your quotes, because I thought this, I actually loved this when you said, sorry, I gotta find it. You said, I liked this. So you said, I knew especially after these 3 months traveling that I was a positive, joy-based person who believed in what other people often consider to be impossible. Through my natural instinct to find creative solutions, I saw alternative realities and took concrete steps to bring them to fruition. I iterated over and over, continually asking, what if? I pilot tested, I experimented, I turned over every idea to see all its angles. I created safe spaces for magic. That was what I was best at. Bureaucratic institutions consider this to mean never being satisfied in a bad way. Entrepreneurial organizations consider this my strength. And I loved
Hmm.
that because I,
Yeah.
sometimes that's how I feel.
Hmm.
And I sometimes feel that many organizations are very intimidated by that entrepreneurial, creative spirit, that person who thinks a little differently and, challenges the status quo and wants to, you know, really look at the impact of something. So how did that impact your decision making along the way with some of the opportunities you have chosen to be part of?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for reading the book. I really appreciate that. I know that, everyone's really busy, you're busy, and to take that time to do that is really touching. So I appreciate that. And for identifying that quote as well, because that's something I've really had to understand about the world and about myself, because I was always in, entrepreneurial businesses. I was at USA Today. I was at a publishing company, Fairchild Publications. I was at um, MetLife. I was in a kind of a entrepreneurial division there, even though it's a large insurance company. I was always kind of with mavericks who were creating new things and understanding that about myself, that that's actually a helpful thing at the right time in the right place. And when it's not feeling like it's helpful, I've learned to identify that I'm not in the right place. Like that's not where I'm going to be the most value. and especially as we age, time, the value of our time becomes more important, I think, and realizing that, we 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 only have a certain number of choices of where we're going to spend it and what we want to leave and what we want to accomplish. And I've seen people around me that can spend 20 years just fighting. And I don't want to do that. Like, I just don't want to do that. So I got lucky because where I live became the newest city in the United States in 2009. So I had this rare opportunity for a couple of years to meld entrepreneurialism and municipality. Like, that doesn't normally go together. And we had a couple years where like all the startup people came out of the woodworks, that came out of their basements and attics and backyards and all met each other. We'd all been here in the city and just didn't know each other before. And in a very short period of time, accomplished a lot of exciting things. So, I mean, you're in a village on Long Island, and it looks like you've done some really breakthrough things as well. I mean, how did you find that with bureaucracy? I mean, maybe being a small village, there's less of it, or is it more ingrained because it's the way things are done for years and years? It could go either way, right?
It's challenging. It's challenging. I mean, how do I just like to I attract and work with people who just like to do the work. I usually, and usually with small groups, you can really get it done. It's when it becomes these large groups or these traditional organizations I don't want to name, but I've just been able to find people, like-minded people who really want to get things done and push through.
Mhm.
And sometimes when there's those political walls, I like to find ways around them. Okay, we can't do it that way. We'll try a different
Mhm.
approach, or maybe we need to modify our goals a little bit, to accomplish a piece of what we want. Sometimes you just, so there's been just a lot of navigating. But it was funny when I first moved out here. I actually lived in Long Beach. I grew up out here, but then I worked in Lower Manhattan as well. And I was living in Queens for a while for commuting
Mhm.
purposes, and then I lived in Long Beach, which I loved because we would bike everywhere there because you parked your car and you didn't want to move your car and that was like the greatest environment. I absolutely loved living there. And then you had the boardwalk, and I walked every season of the year. It was wonderful. And when we moved back out here, I missed like I felt like I wasn't by nature. Even though I'm back out here, there's just so much construction and so many retail. Everything
Mhm.
is, everything's focused on building houses or building commercial properties. I couldn't, and then when I found the one farm that exists in Center H, like the only farm in Brookhaven, not in Brookhaven, but that's really around my area, it was like such a gem. But when I tried to look for more land, I was basically told, no, you have to go out east, that's where the land is. And I was like, there's nothing here. And I even tried to find people who were sitting on real estate and they were out in Pennsylvania. And I would say to them, let me just put a farm or small garden on your property. I'll pay the taxes, I'll hook up the water. And then in a few years, when you want to sell it, you can. And they were just like, no, no. It's like I was getting so much resistance, even from the politicians, from the people, the residences, and it's tough. It's like you know like I'm that type of person who tries to navigate and innovate and stuff, but I get a lot of resistance here, and I sometimes feel that I am a fish out of water here, and there's a few of us, but I I don't know if like I want to move soon. I do want to I need more space because it's just getting way too crowded, and sometimes you just get sick of fighting City Hall and you want to just be around more like-minded people because
Right.
it does get tough to constantly challenge the norms. you want to make some progress. But we have, especially with my historical society, we have trails right here that I didn't
Mhm.
even know existed before, and I helped map those trails, and we've made it a very safe park for people to walk and hike. And we do tons of events in there. And it's really, it's this, few acres in the middle of all this residential area, and it's become a gem in the community. So
Mhm.
I've utilized my resources to the best of my ability, but it's hard. It's
Yeah.
tough. It's tough when you're not around very like-minded people, So,
Well, yeah, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, first, before I forget, 'cause I will, long in the book, when I talk about sitting on the rock jetties and writing poems, that was in Long Beach.
okay.
So, yeah, I was beelining down the Meadowbrook Parkway and going to Long Beach, instead of whatever else people do in high school. That's what I was doing.
Yeah, Long Beach is, I love it. I,
So,
I loved it there. I
yeah,
was sad when I left.
right. Well, and as far as the pushback, I mean, again, I just actually 4 days ago or something, I just turned 61, and I just I don't have time anymore. I just like I know you're a bit younger, but it is true. I've heard it say that when you turn 60, you get a tap. I'm going to get teary. You get a tap on the shoulder, and it just says, it's time. It's time. You let that all go. And now what it is you want to achieve, what it is you want to experience, who you want to be left as a memory, who you still want to honor and touch and serve. I still have my elders. Now is the time.
Yeah.
So that all just fell away very quickly for me with City Hall. I stay in touch. I'll give a little update. I gave a big shout out. If you do still have the energy and interest, however, I cannot say enough good things about starting a community garden. I don't know if you have a community garden. However, when we started that community garden, we started it within the year of the city forming. Like, folks who have absolutely nothing in common got together, and we built this community garden, which is now the largest volunteer run community garden in the state of Georgia. And to this day, 15 years later, folks will be at City Hall, supporting each other or saying hello or hugging. And I see sometimes other folks say, like, how do they know each other? Why are those two working together? And I'm like, we built a fence together. I mean, we're just so bonded across ages, generations,
Yeah.
ideologies, socioeconomics, everything. So I can't say enough good things about starting a community garden or a food pantry garden.
Agreed, 100%. We had one at the farm and that an area, and then we started one here and by town hall, and and we had a few people participating. And one day we went back up there, and the big equipment had completely torn it up because they were putting in a solar farm, and they never
Uh,
even told us. So I've had my,
okay.
we've tried actually at the
No,
Historical Society property. We have plans. It's just we don't have a water source right now. So it's
mhm.
again a work in progress, but
Right.
it will happen. It's just a matter of when. It just takes sometimes, as we know, it just takes time to navigate
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, and you don't have to you don't have to hold up. You don't have to put the moon and stars in the sky every night. Like that's a freedom, especially now, like when our children are leaving, and again, you know, there's the menopause thing. I mean, we have a hormonal change, which means we are different. We are motivated by different things. We have a different energy and life force and set of, I don't know, callings happening right now. And they may not align with the people around you. And that's okay. It's exciting when people do different things, when people have, you know, different journeys and they're able to share it with each other. So, I mean, be open. I mean, I know you are, but it's a reminder to myself to just be open about change.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay, I have to. So, What brought on this journey that you took across America? Like, how did you think of it? Like, like
Yeah,
how did it come to be? And then why doing it via Woof? So just
right.
give me that thinking.
Oh gosh, I appreciate that question. And it's so funny. So few people ask me that question. And I appreciate that we're this far into this conversation without you saying, "What does your husband think?" Because that was the very first and often only question that people would ask me when I said that I was thinking about doing this. And I really appreciate that question. I think I can count on one hand how many people have asked me that in the last several years.
Wow.
I know, kind of eye opening, right? Kind of
Yeah.
surprising. So I was, I've always been into the agriculture thing, and I've been organic, sustainable agriculture. And I was a writer for many years. I wrote for magazines, and I had lots of clients like you do, that are in the industry and corporate folks who were doing big sustainability work and whatever. And I'm an experiential writer, so I really like to do things hands-on. And I'm also deeply, deeply concerned about the climate impacts that are happening. And I like to be helpful. So I know I have some skills to share, but I also knew I had a lot to learn. And I was specifically interested in the different climates. I mean, right now, in all honesty, I didn't garden or farm when I was on Long Island. And I'd have to learn that if I moved back to Long Island, because I'm used to this climate for all these years.
Right.
So anyway, you're reading the newspaper all the time, and there's such incredibly bad news, and a lot of it's climate related. Or if you go back far enough in the story, you'll get to the climate impacts that caused the stress or tension or war or whatever. And so much of it was happening right here in our country. And when you overlay that with the political issues, there was just a lot I was tired of reading about, and I wanted to go see for myself, and I wanted to experience. I wanted to understand it better, and I wanted to learn with the hopes that maybe I could be helpful. Like, again, moving into this new life stage where really all I want to do is be helpful. Then maybe I'd have more to offer. So that was part of it, and also going back several years, my way of trying to do that globally was I applied for the Peace Corps and was accepted. I was accepted to the Peace Corps. I was accepted as an agribusiness specialist at I was 50. I was 56 or something at the time,
I love
and
that, by the way.
and it was wild. I mean, it was a wild journey. So keep in mind, my entire family was prepared for me to be away for over 2 years in Uganda on the equator. And I was set to go. I have my passport. I have it right now. It's like a memento. My special passport and my tickets were in Washington, and I was set to go. I had cleaned out the house. My husband and I had a whole plan. We might have, considered moving to a apartment, selling the house while I was gone. We were not sure what we were going to do next. Our youngest was about to graduate from college. Whatever, all of it was happening, and then the pandemic hit. So the Peace Corps kept delaying me for 3 months at a time. I hung in there for a year and a half of being packed and ready to go. Every 3 months, it kept getting delayed. And of course, the pandemic changed all of our lives in so many ways. And that was one of the ones for me that I ended up not getting to go. And really tested my trust the journey philosophy, which I've had for many years. And I was still itchy afterwards. I worked with Alaska for a year with the CDC Foundation, with their Department of Health. I worked on a Healthy You communications project, videos and stuff, and remotely. And I was, that was ending. That contract was ending. It was a 10-month contract. They hired like 3,000 people across the country. They were all working with states. And the contract was ending. And I was looking on like LinkedIn, and I don't know, it was just awful. It was just like, I can't, maybe that's not the next step here. Maybe there's something else that needs to happen. And I had this silly little duck that my friend had given me. I had this little rubber duck that I had put on my bike, and folks were getting like, they were just nicer to me when they saw this duck. It was this weird little social anthropology thing, cultural anthropology thing, because everyone had kind of stopped talking between, COVID and the isolation. And I don't know, everyone was just, I used to have this, I still have it, this Instagram feed called Today's Nice Stranger. And I used to meet so many people, and I used to take these portraits when I was out and about. And like months had gone without me having a portrait. And then I put the duck on the bike, and folks just started talking to me again. And I was like, is that the answer? I mean, do I just go across the country with this silly little duck? And
now, is this the same duck?
yeah, that's the duck. I think I may
Okay.
have. Yeah, I have that duck. I think I have him with me. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. There's the real one.
Yeah, his little strap broke, so I'm having a little problem with him. But yeah, his name is Disco, and he's just been so much fun. He's just been so much fun. I have all these TikToks from the journey. He's like looking out the bus window, and he's on my bike, all over the country. So
that's great.
Yeah, and I made little stickers that said "Have a Ducky Day," and I was giving them to. I was just going to give them to kids, but I mean, folks liked them, so I was giving them out to lots of folks.
That's great.
But I guess I would say, like, my short answer to your question is, it just kind of happened naturally. By the
Excellent.
time I made the decision to do this, with my family and friends, it was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Wow.
It wasn't as like crazy or silly an idea as it sounds.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
And then, of course, I mean, at that point, it was like, oh my gosh, it's only 5 months, which might have sounded like a long time, but I was ready to go to Uganda for 2 years.
Yes, a completely different country.
Right. So. And my parents, my dad in particular, who, he was just like, is it in the United States? Can you come home if you need to? I'm like, yes. So this trip looked like, everyone was breathing a sigh of relief when I mentioned this one, Although I will tell you, I am still on that Peace Corps site, and I'm not done with it yet. I'm not done with that yet.
So okay. So I just want to touch on, I figured that because that's always been an interest of mine. Because we'll
go together.
I would totally be into that. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about a few things. We could talk offline, because I'm like, I always thought there's certain things I always wanted to do. And I'm like, sometimes it is safety in numbers, and it's nice to do something with someone. So I was like, oh, she would be a great person to do that with. But the Peace Corps, I have met in some of my travels, Peace Corps, people working for the Peace Corps. And I gravitate right to them, and I'm always asking them a ton of questions. I specifically remember when I was in the Dominican Republic, and we were doing some filming it was an all-women's cacao farm, and they were actually making chocolate. And my daughter Anna was actually with me for this, the one who goes to Geneseo. And there was this gentleman there, and he was helping them develop their business, and he was part of the Peace Corps. And I just was like, oh, that's so awesome. Like, I would love to do that. Yeah. So it's always been an attraction of mine. It was funny because Anna mentioned it to me too, recently. She just got back from Mexico. She traveled learning about cacao and coffee in Mexico for 13 days. So, yeah. So, okay.
Well, I would like to add for folks listening that what was important for me to do to kind of come to terms with what happened with the Peace Corps and COVID was to identify what about it was appealing to me.
Yep.
And the part that was appealing was helping and learning, and here in the United States and all around the world, there are so many farmers who really need help and have a lot to teach and are great places. I think that's how it led me to WWOOF partly. Yep. And my younger daughter had been looking into it as well. So there are so many ways, and people always say there's so many ways to help close to home. And there's so many other ways. So I don't want to glamorize Peace Corps. Peace Corps has its own issues. I would just like to say that that did open my mind and my heart to what it was I was really feeling pulled toward.
Absolutely. It's more the
Yeah,
concept of what you're doing.
right. And farmers really, really need and appreciate the help, and not just and there is so much to learn and share, as you know. So I cannot say enough good things about my WWOOF experience. I really can't. So I expect, I mean, I don't know, again, if I ever end up at the Peace Corps, I would be very happy if I can continue WWOOFing for, at least this journey that I'm going on. And I don't know, maybe a few more years. We'll see.
You had a few different WWOOF experiences, and they're all highlighted in the book, and I loved reading about them. First, let's just highlight one of them, and I do want to talk about because you definitely, highlighted some of the things to think about when you're considering this.
Mhm.
So I don't know if Kansas is the one you want to highlight. Or, the one with lavender, and was it llamas? Llamas and lavender?
Yeah.
Yes. So you choose what you want to.
Well, what is it? Well, first, let me for your listeners, WWOOF. It's WWOOF,
Yep.
and it's a international organization, but every country has its own, independent chapter, and it's where it's volunteer tourism, really, I guess, in a way. Volunteer education. You volunteer your time about 25 to 30 hours a week in exchange for free room and board on an organic, not just farm. There's ranches, there's eco spirituality centers, there's a wide range of places, and the accommodations there's a really wide range of accommodations and experiences as well. So there's an excellent website. It's WWOOFUSA I think it's .org, and it's excellent. And right away on the front, it says find your farm. You don't have to join in order to search that website. You do have to join in order to communicate with the farmers back and forth. The WWOOF organization often has a webinar, which is fantastic. My husband and I attended that. That was like the first thing we did to see, what do we think? Is this something to consider? And they often, if you attend the webinar, you'll often get like a $5 discount or something on the membership, which is like $35 or $40 a year and worth every penny. So if you're looking to travel internationally and do something like this, most of the international folks join something called Workaway, because Workaway has one price for the whole world, whereas WWOOF, you have to join each individual country, and each country has its own price, So if you're wanting to go to multiple countries on one trip, it makes more sense to do Workaway. But if you're just interested in one, if you want to go just to Italy or just to France or just the United States or just to Ireland, like where I'm going next, it's just, it's only one fee for that country.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. So, so to highlight so I've been to I've WWOOFed at 8 different places now. There was one I pilot tested.
Yes.
Nearby, which I strongly recommend that for folks. I pilot tested WWOOFing for almost 2 weeks, about 25 miles away from my home. I pilot tested bringing my bike on the bus. I pilot tested like a whole bunch of things before I left. And then there were 5 farms, ranches, and eco spirituality centers in the book, during that journey. And then since I've come back home, I've done 2 more here in the state of Georgia. So that's another thing. If you don't feel like you have the time or the ability to go, across the country, there could be a WWOOF farm not far from you. And some of them even have day volunteering opportunities, or you can just go for a weekend or something like that. So you can do like a WWOOF light experience to see what you think about it first.
That's great.
So I did that here so that I would just kind of have some local farm relationships so that I could just get, I don't know, maybe I'll just get my farm fix every year, and go to each of them for a week or two. And, it gives you options close to home. So, yeah. So to highlight, I don't know which one, what aspect are you interested in?
It doesn't matter why.
Right.
Because I know obviously each of them had, fed your soul in a different way.
Yeah.
Which one would you go back to, at least at this point in your life?
Yeah. Well, so I was at a goat farm in North Carolina. I was at this alpaca ranch, an art eco spirituality ranch in Kansas. I was at a homestead, so to speak,
Yeah.
in Boulder. I was at a Krishna temple, which was also a llama, and also they had some big gardens in Utah. And then I was at another llama and lavender farm in the high desert of California. That was during the journey. Those are all in the book. And Kansas, I know you mentioned Kansas because I felt in love with the place that I was staying in Kansas. It just ticked every box for so many reasons. It was run by the Dominican Sisters of Peace, who were both basically just these like badass women, in their late 70s and 80s. I can't even tell you how cool these women are. Like climbing on the roof and driving tractors, and they just knew. I mean, wrangling alpacas. They were so cool, and I learned so much from them. And they also have, for those who like, fiber arts and the arts related to farming, they had this beautiful, gorgeous cob hectagonal art studio that had spinning wheels and looms, and we were carding the alpaca fleece and everything about it. And they did spirituality and meditation retreats at 80 acres, gorgeous sunrises, gorgeous sunsets, meals together 3 or 4 times a week for lunch, which was just enough. I loved it. And then it was literally, when you're flying over the United States and you look down, if you've done this, especially from, New York to LA or whatever, you look down and you're like, oh, we're over the Midwest. And you just see these like squares, these squares of dirt and these squares of green. And you're just like, oh, those are all all the farms. Well, that's where I was. And it was a dirt road that went 6 miles. It took me 6 miles to go around the block. And it was just a dirt road in Kansas around one of those blocks. It was heaven. The swaying grasses, and it was a migratory bird flyover zone.
Wow.
So I had downloaded, there's that app from Cornell University's School of Ornithology, Merlin, I think it's called. And I would just lie in this hammock and just, you turn it on and like 40 bird pipes would come up.
Wow.
It identifies the sounds. So that just fed my soul in every which way because they were so kind and so generous. And yeah, I mean, I really felt like I died and went to heaven at that place. However, it was very isolated. So if I were to actually move anywhere, the only place I looked at real estate on the whole journey was a Spanish Fork, Utah, which is outside of Provo, which is outside of Salt Lake City. And that was where the Krishna temple was. And I was there for a month. And I could just ride my bike everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And there was so much to do in Spanish Fork, Utah for me. I mean, they had a food pantry, they had a community garden, they had apricots growing on the trees everywhere when I was there. They had this beautiful greenway. They had really, really, really wide, what do you call it, shoulders on all this. They're not even like a bronze level bike friendly community. They are just the best place to ride a bike. And I don't even think they didn't even do it intentionally, Yeah. So I loved it. Absolutely loved it there. And I could just ride my bike up to that ice cream place and get the ice cream cone right at the window. I mean, these little simple things that really made it feel livable to me. And it's just surrounded by the Wasatch Mountains, which I didn't even know existed, and the Krishna temple itself was just an absolute joy. So I really, really love that place. I love them all. They all had something really good to offer. So I don't want to pick and choose, but there's something you could say great about them all. There's a lot to see in this country, you
Yeah,
know.
there is a ton to see in this country. People don't realize that until you actually get out. Just a few, do you have like, so if someone was considering doing such a journey, whether it was local to them or, away like you did, any like quick tips or things to consider?
Yeah. For woofing, or like specifically about woofing, or do you keep in
Yes.
mind it was so that I just a quick aside, I did this whole journey. It ends up being about 10,000 miles. And the intercity travel was by bus and train. And then I used my bike locally for all my the majority of my transportation everywhere I went. And then I also used some local buses and trains.
I have to say, I felt your stress around the bus situation. I just
Yeah.
was like,
So
every time you had to get on a bus, I was like, oh no.
I know. I'm still feeling that way. Like I'm still feeling that way even when I did my local ones here in Georgia. I mean,
I would never have thought of
I know.
that.
Well, I would say, yeah, that's the big thing. So I did this car free, and there, you can do it because I did it, but it was really challenging. And the big challenge here in the United States is that our buses and trains just don't go everywhere. The buses, I can't say enough good things about Amtrak. Amtrak, yes, I loved Amtrak, but Greyhound too. I really loved them, and I loved the buses were clean and comfortable, and the bus drivers were fantastic. However, a lot of places I was going, there was one bus a day, and or your connection, there might be one or two opportunities a day. And if your bus was late for any reason, then you're out of luck. You're just out of luck. So I had a couple incidents that are in the book that were really harrowing, and I almost ended up canceling the journey, a few times, pretty specifically because of the buses and the problems I was having with them across the country. And it also really limits where you can go. I mean, when you're 2 hours away from somewhere and that's considered like close enough, that ended up Kansas. I ended up 2 hours away, and they go up to Wichita often. So they were happy to pick me up. I mean, that's a crazy situation where you can't get any closer than 2 hours.
Wow.
So the buses and trains were really challenging. I have a lot to say about them that I haven't, I shared a lot in the book about that. So would I do it again? Yeah, I'm really, really glad I did that. As I'm looking at other countries, I know there's, other countries with established bus and train, systems. I may have done the hardest one already, So the United States may have been particularly the hardest.
Which you wouldn't think, like,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
wouldn't intuitively think, but then when you do think about
right.
how we do, what do we do? Everyone hops in their own car, like we don't
Right.
think about when you
Yeah.
don't have those means, the challenges.
I know. I mean, I'd like to talk to I haven't reached out yet. I'm sure he's busy, but I feel like Pete Buttigieg and I need to have a little chat because he's always advocating for the airplane folks. But every single day in this country, there are mothers and children and disabled people with disabilities sitting on curbs in blazing sun and pouring rain without bathrooms and foods, waiting for buses that may or may not come.
Yeah.
Every day. And it was absolutely heartbreaking to me to see the conditions in which people are traveling in this country.
Right. And you also highlighted being a woman and
Mm-hmm.
feeling sometimes very uncomfortable in some situations.
Yeah. I mean, it's that unknown of just you're going to be stranded or abandoned. And again, I was traveling with, I had a backpack. I also had the bicycle, I have a folding bike. Here's the bike. I'm showing.
Excellent. Yep.
So it folds, but it's still very it goes in a big bag, but it's still very cumbersome. And what I like about the bike is I could use it as a barrier, and if I needed to as a weapon, I
Right.
could shove
Absolutely.
with it. And I kind of needed that more with dogs than anything else, if you want to know the truth. But when I was just sitting there on a curb with this I was not agile. I couldn't get up and run,
Right.
So I was really vulnerable in those circumstances, which is why I brought the oranges. So I traveled with a bag of oranges. I figured this out again when I used the bus one time. I brought this bag of oranges with me, of clementines, and I just offered them to folks, and you make friends.
Yeah.
And that's really like, it's a real social survival. I think that's like what the journey became clear to me was, the social survival necessity that you really do need to connect with people. You need to find ways to find common ground. And you need ultimately to be able to trust, even though the circumstances around us so many times and the news we're hearing leads us to believe we shouldn't trust.
Yep.
So yeah, those were those were hard reminders. Yeah. And as far as woofing, I mean, the woof itself, Woof USA does offer a bunch of really good tips. They have really good social media and they offer a lot of really good tips, questions to ask.
Yeah.
So, the most important thing is to understand yourself and what your boundaries are and what your comfort is. And another thing, my biggest tip is to remind folks that are thinking of doing any kind of volunteerism is that in the United States, the value of a volunteer hour, it just went up. It's something like 30 something dollars per hour is what an organization, a nonprofit organization, can claim that your time was worth. So when they're applying for grants, they add up any place that keeps track of your hours. They're adding up all of those hours and timesing it by this standard rate across the United States. And they're including that in their grant applications for when they're going for matching funds or anything like that. So I think the most important thing for you to remember for people who want to do this is your value. And it's not that they would have paid a farm worker that 30 something dollars, but you could have chosen to go to a different organization that could have then banked off your value.
Got it.
With their grant applications. So I always try to think of that. And I actually run the numbers in my mind. I run a list with the numbers where I'll say, this is the value of this accommodations. This is the value of this food. This is the value I'm attaching to this experience. And here's the value of the number of hours that I've donated. And I try to look for there to be some sort of an equity between those two columns when I make a decision. And then, very practically, I like to have a private sleeping space. I don't want to share a sleeping space. I don't mind hand washing my clothes. I don't mind sharing a bathroom. I like to have a bathroom, in one of my circumstances, I didn't. So, so I think just kind of knowing yourself, and that's where if you do a pilot test, I think that's actually super helpful, to do a pilot test and see, okay, this made me uncomfortable. I mean, some people don't want to eat alone. Some people really want to eat alone, and, you want to see if you go somewhere where you're expected to eat every meal with the family, that might not be comfortable. And also it depends on what you think of that family and what how you get along with that family.
Right.
They may have very different views, political views, religious views, and you may or may not be comfortable with that. So those are things you really wouldn't realize until you're like literally living with strangers,
Yeah, no, it's tough.
How do you feel about bugs? How do you feel about snakes? Mice,
scorpions.
Right. I mean, a lot of WWOOF locations are camping based.
Yeah.
And like in Hawaii and whatnot, there's a lot of places that are really, really rugged. And I had to kind of remind myself of that sometimes that, what would it be like if I was hiking the Appalachian Trail,
Yep.
So you have to kind of figure out for yourself, like where your comfort level is with just the basic living things,
Two of the funny moments, probably wasn't funny for you at the time, but the thing about the well and the waterfall, I'm sorry. I was when you said that to the woman and she's like, "What are you like?" I was like, "Uh-oh." That was funny.
I was in the high desert of California and very arid, very, very hot, over 100 degrees. I was in over 100 degrees every day for a number of weeks between that place and the Krishna temple. And there was a well that we had to open it was on the ground. I don't know what you call it. You have to open. You had to turn the thing to get the well water to fill up the tank so that we could flush the toilet in the mobile home. And in the well thing, it was very hard to turn, and there were also scorpions. So you had to watch for both those things. And I did not turn it off well enough the first weekend. And there ended up being I thought it was a lovely little waterfall or freshwater spring the whole weekend. And there's no freshwater spring in this place. So my very first, I had gotten there on a Friday night. And I was all of a sudden alone for 2 days, completely alone for 2 days. And, which was fine because I was catching up on writing and I had been traveling, this is the very end of my journey. So, it was fine. But by Monday morning, when my farm liaison came, yeah, that was a little bit of a shock to both of us that there was not a waterfall supposed to be on this ranch. So yeah, it took literally like 3 days for that flood to clean up.
It just it was good. That was good. That was a good moment.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I guess she took it okay though. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
sometimes people
I know. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you get into these vulnerable moments where you're like, okay, it's enough that I'm, at that point I was a week away from turning 60, and I'm a stranger. So you have these things in your mind that you kind of have to, you want to make a good impression. And that was kind of my first impression that I made. So yeah, I had to climb uphill from that one. So.
And you did, based on the review she gave you. Yeah. So I definitely think.
Right. So, on the other hand, I mean, it shouldn't be so hard to open and close this thing,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, a fear of also the scorpions probably didn't help the matters, like the potential for scorpions. So.
Yes. Yes.
And rattlesnakes.
Yeah, that was that was an intense physical place from a nature perspective for a girl from Long Island,
Yeah, no, that was
a lot.
It was a lot, definitely.
I was talking to my mother, my 88-year-old mother, and I'm riding my bike. I just kind of ride around it was on like 3 levels of this mountain. And there were up llamas and down llamas and chickens. And I would ride my bike around all of it. At the end of the day there, I talked to my mother while doing it. And I said, look, I got to hurry. I've got to get back to the mobile home before the rattlesnakes start. Because they would kind of cross over it was a dirt road and they'd cross over it. My guess is as the sun was going down, the snakes were going somewhere. And she'd be like, okay, go, get off the phone, go.
Oh man, that's intense. That's intense.
Yeah. So it's just, and again, if I was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, I mean, folks do that every day. Women do that women do these things all the time. So what I did was big for me, but it would probably be very small for someone else. So, I guess my advice to folks is, what is that thing that scares you? It's good to scare yourself. I think that's the other takeaway. It is good to scare yourself, and it is good to put yourself in situations where you are definitely outside your comfort zone.
Yep. I know that was a big message that you had in the book. Absolutely.
I mean, especially as we age, I think it's easier to not do those things.
Yeah.
And it's easier also to listen to voices around you. They're like, oh, I could never do that. Or, oh, why would you want to do that? Or, oh, I need my comforts. It's good to not need them for a little while, or to at least challenge yourself to not, to do something different, whatever that is. Yeah.
I want to ask you, I do want to talk about your next journey, but hold that thought. So you had a sweatshirt and on the back it said, "Dear person behind me, the world is a better place with you in it. Love the person in front of you." And the front is, "I am enough." Mm-hmm. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok, and that was a sweatshirt that they'd been selling, right before I went on the journey. And it really hit me. And the on the front, it actually says, "You are enough."
Okay.
So, and I did interpret it just like you did as I am enough. When I read that, and my hope, of course, is that other people, when they saw it, they saw themselves as well. But it was the message on the back that turned out to be the real, you know, real tender moment on an ongoing basis throughout the journey, because I was thinking I was going to be on a lot of lines, between the buses and the trains and all that stuff. This might be a nice thing to just have on. It turns out that almost every time I wore it, I would say every time I wore it, when I was around other people, somebody would tap me on the shoulder and thank me for that sweatshirt, and often with tears in their eyes. And, I had just been working with Alaska. Again, their State Department of Health, and there's a huge suicide crisis. I mean, happening everywhere, but Alaska is particularly hard hit. And teenage girls and kind of all the demographics in different ways. And so I had been writing about it and doing videos about it. So, and 988, which is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, had just launched.
Wow.
I think it launched in July of 2022, kind of soft launch. So this was all very much on my mind, and awareness that a lot of people are really suffering. And especially, where we are now in relation to the pandemic. I mean, we really haven't, everyone lost something or someone, and we've never really grieved as a nation about that. And so I know there's a lot of personal grieving happening. So that was my incentive for wearing it. And so many incredibly beautiful and moving moments happened because of that sweatshirt. So I was really happy to be able to carry that message in a way that, it was just, if I'm going to be out and about, why not? Why not share a positive message that folks are not alone? Yeah. So
I love the way that there, I don't know, you integrated so many, I don't know what the word is. There was just so much integrated into this trip. The simple things that just had such an impact way beyond just what you were doing. Like, just like this sweatshirt, this simple message, and just the people you interacted with that you may never have spoken to, but you did interact with them because of that sweatshirt. So it was just, it was cool.
I really appreciate that. Was there anything in particular when you were reading it where you're like, oh, I would like to do that, or, I mean, was there a particular farm or the bus or train or anything where you were like, huh?
Honestly, I'm trying to think. It was all, honestly, just the concept of what you did and how you did it was intriguing to me. I don't know, I mean, honestly, all the places you went to me, just the connections you made actually stood out for me, like just how you were connecting with people and just having that opportunity to connect with people on that level. Because like we were talking about before, sometimes you're in your routine and you just need to move out of it. And that's what the podcast has done for me, right? Because I am kind of constrained. Like my youngest is still in high school. She's finishing up this year. And I kind of feel like once she goes to college, I have more of a freedom to start moving around kind of. And so, and make those connections on a real life, physical level versus just a virtual level like we're doing now. But it just, it wasn't any place in particular. It was just what you were doing, where you were doing it, how you were doing it, like the way you were, the biking, just the connections you made. I just absolutely loved being part of that experience through your book. And being brave enough to do it, and being honest when you were, you didn't feel brave and you felt afraid, and that honesty was important, I thought, because you don't want to make this into this, oh, everything was all good all the time. I mean, there were legitimate fears, And like we were talking about with the transportation thing, I would have never, ever thought of that as a concern in America. But now when you broke it down and then when I really started thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, that is a real
Yeah.
concern. Um, so I know I'm not boiling this down to anything in particular, but I love the fact that you did this and you put yourself, like you said, do things that are scary, put yourself out there, you know, and then you did it in a way, obviously now you're highlighting it for other people, which, and there were so many inspirational messages in there, and moments. So that's obviously why I have all these pages of quotes and everything, because a lot of these quotes and a lot of things you said really resonated with me, especially at my time in my life, and everything that's going on, and just this creative journey that I'm on right now to kind of figure out what do I want to do. That was one thing, and I don't know if I'm going to find the quote. There are so many ways to live a life. When do we stay and when do we go? But you said there are so many ways to live a life throughout the entire book. And that resonated with me too, because like in that moment in Kansas, you were like, oh, do I want to be here? And then, and I feel that a lot when I connect with people. I'm like, oh, that would be cool. And this will be cool. But you kind of have to figure that out for yourself, I guess.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's been really, a good reminder is that, again, we don't have to always change our lives completely. We can just dip into things,
Right.
we can just make it a part of our life. Like, for
Yep.
instance, that lavender and llama farm in the high desert with the snakes and scorpions, granted. But
And
I was
waterfalls.
just like living my French lavender farm dream there. I was listening to the Parisian cafe music, and it was just freaking heaven. And so, of course, I came home. And then I was also here in Georgia. I went to a lavender farm as well. That was one of the two that I went to here in Georgia. And now I've got 7 lavender plants at my home, and I have my own I had a nice little harvest. I have the culinary one and the aromatic one, and I know the differences between them. And, so now I have a little bit of that. So am I going to have a lavender farm in Provence? No, but I have my own now, and it's just a little bit. So you start to find that. And I just want to share with your listeners that one of the priorities for me for this journey was to do it on a really, really strict budget. And as a matter of fact, I chose my budget from when I backpacked in 1985. My friend and I went to 10 countries in Europe on $20 a day.
Wow.
And so I used that same budget, not adjusted for inflation for this journey. So keeping in mind, I traveled something like 22, 23 weeks, and more than 18 of them, I wasn't paying for food and board. So that's huge, So I ultimately was able to do this journey we estimated for less than it would have cost if I was home.
Wow.
So if you're, right. So when you're starting to think, I can never do that because I couldn't afford that, or I can never do that because I don't have the time, there may be a time when you do have the time, or that you can do it in smaller pieces. But it doesn't need to cost any more than, for me, I was starting to feel like I was I'd say in the book that I was rotting on the bottom of a hill in suburbia. And it was starting to feel that way. I mean, there was a lot of good things happening in my life, but it wasn't going anywhere,
Right.
and it was surprising to me that this was possible, and of course, if you're committing to that kind of budget, you are committing to searching out free things, and free things end up being the richest in a lot of ways. Those
Yep.
are the bike rides along the rivers, and the talking with the strangers, and just really being fully present at the farms and trying to learn as much as I could, and appreciating, we like to say we love the simple things, but really living that as much as possible.
Yep.
So yeah, so it can be super accessible to do things like this. And you meet people that are doing it in far more intricate and interesting ways than I am. And so you learn from them as well. People that are cat sitting in major cities around the world. I mean, they're cat sitting in all the most expensive best cities, So there are ways to live. There are so many ways to live a life. Yeah. And as far as like family goes, I will say that like this experience has enriched all of us. Our conversation, we have all these new things to talk about. We all had different things happening during the time that I was traveling, and it felt so good to all have so much to share, yeah, especially when
You have 2 daughters or 3 daughters?
I have 2. You have
2.
3, right?
I have 2 daughters and a son.
2 daughters,
Yes.
right. I have 2 daughters. So 2, they're both grown now. One's in New York and one's in LA. So my journey
Wow.
included stops with both of them. Yeah.
Wow. And how, what's been their feedback to you about this?
Oh, they love it. They love it. They've been amazing. It's been this natural progression to, what I've been doing throughout our whole lives, as far as the agriculture and uh, meeting people and interviewing folks and all that good stuff. And then, it's given, I think when we as mothers take risks and do things that are a little different, I think it gives everyone around us the freedom to take risks and do things that are different, because they know that you're going to be their biggest champion, their biggest supporter, because you've done the same thing. And both of my daughters are very bold and very adventurous and have done things that have really inspired me. So I think it kind of puts us, after we leave that sort of mother-daughter stage and we get into the, just really compatriots on this journey of life. Yeah. And I think that happens like even when they were younger, there were times when we would take buses, like we'd spend a whole summer taking buses together. And then you're not like the parent driving anymore. You're just 2 people trying to figure out the system. So it's been really positive, the impact on my family.
Excellent.
Yeah. More so than I would have imagined, actually. Yeah.
So you're going away soon again?
Yeah, I'm leaving in 2 weeks.
So tell me what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm taking the train up to New York, and then I'm flying over to Ireland, and I'm woofing. I've joined Woof Ireland, and I'm woofing. So that's like also when you're thinking of doing something like that first step, just joining something. That's a really magical moment, that day when you join and all of a sudden you're manifesting it. You're putting it out there as a possibility. So actually right before I left for the America journey, I saw that my passport was expiring like literally like within a month. And I raced out and renewed it right before I left, thinking, I don't know, when I come back, I might want to go somewhere different. So I am. So so I'll be on 3 different farms in 3 different areas of Ireland. And my grandparents emigrated from Ireland, and March 4th is always my big day every year. I'm like, March 4th, it kicks off the spring. And, it's this day of possibilities. Everything's possible. March 4th into your dreams, into your future. And I discovered through my kind of heritage research and preparation for going that my grandmother, she came 6 months before my grandfather. Her first day on American soil was March 4th.
Oh, wow.
And this upcoming March 4th will be the 100th anniversary.
Wow.
So I didn't know that. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited. I'm nervous. I'm super nervous. And part of why I'm so nervous is actually the transportation. And I keep reminding myself, and then you're like, sometimes you go on, Reddit or something, and there's like, oh, the transportation's terrible. And I have to remind myself, comparatively, it's got to be better.
Guess we're gonna find out.
It's got to be better. I don't know. So the whole country is the size of South Carolina. So I don't know. I'm really excited. I'm on 3 very different farms. One is a horse and cattle farm in the south. One is a walled kitchen garden at a castle right by the border between the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And the third is way on the west by the Wild Atlantic Way.
Wow.
At this guy seems super. He's got a kind of a community-based farm. He's got sheep and donkeys and a CS. He does a big CSA, community-supported agriculture with crops. So I'm really excited about that. And then I'll be down in Galway a little bit, and then back to Dublin. I'm staying in a hostel. I've got a room of 8 people in Dublin. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. Scared. I'm nervous. I was nervous going to the ones in Georgia. I went down to Amtrak and took a bus 2 hours, and I was so scared. I was so scared. You just like, you're putting yourself in these really vulnerable circumstances. What's the food situation? Am I going to get along with the people? Where am I going to ride my bike? Are there going to be mice in the airstream? It's scary. It's scary, but it's a good scary.
Excellent. That's amazing. I just want to highlight 2 other quick things that stood out to me. A lot did, but on one of I don't remember where it was in the book. I know it was on page 136 because I wrote that down. You talked about, and I think this had to do. This is what it said. In retrospect, I realized that I was perhaps confused, and I can't remember which this. I guess this was the one. Was it Missouri? Where did you not stay?
I think you're talking about Boulder on that.
It might have been. Hold on. I didn't know how gardeners would join the WWOOF program as hosts. Is this something I could do? Yes, it was. I could do with my home garden. Because I thought this was an interesting concept you came up with during the trip. You said, with our rapidly aging population and more older folks staying in their large homes, might promoting this non-commercial small-scale work-stay option be a way for people to not only learn about home gardening and help other folks who may not be as physically up to tasks anymore, but also provide affordable living arrangements for long-term woofers in cities and towns. For woofers who work remotely, this could be a real win-win. I thought that was really, really clever and important. No, but I think it was really important, actually, and that's why I wanted to point it out.
Yeah, you can tell you work with municipalities because, it's like trying to find these solutions to these problems that we see.
But sometimes they're right there.
I know. Well, I've heard about that, like with some of the old schools, sometimes they're putting seniors and they're helping with childcare. And then I've seen a couple situations where young artists are living in senior centers and stuff. I mean, I hope, when you asked the very first question, do I feel hopeful? I'm hopeful that we're going to see, and I think following something like a pandemic, I'm expecting to see a real surge of creativity. Artistically, there's so much that happened, so much that's pent up, so much, so many needs became so apparent. And I think we're going to see a real surge in creativity and problem solving. And I think we've got huge problems, enormous. They can get you to the point where you don't feel that hope anymore. And a significant number of people I met told me they did not feel hope until we started talking, and then we would find our way back to hope. But things like that, I think there's a million ideas like that. And there are the people who have these ideas really are the people who are sitting on those curbs waiting for buses. They know the solutions. The people who are having trouble with housing, they know what could work for them. We just need to get more of those folks all of us. We need the diversity of voices at the table and the willingness to do things differently.
Yep.
And I think that's the same challenge we face at this stage of our life, just the willingness to do things differently and to allow a diversity of voices to kind of guide us forward the best way that we can help, but also what we still need to learn, which so much. There's so much yet to learn, which is exciting.
I'm going to ask you this question because you asked it in the book, I guess, of us. There are so many ways to live a life. Would I go back to the life I left, or would I change it as a result of the journey? So what is your answer to that?
God, I just love that you asked that, because I'm feeling really, really emotional right now this last week, because it's the 1 year anniversary of the end of the journey right now. And so TikTok sends me every day on this day, they send me the video from the year before. And the emotions were so extreme at that end. Like right now, I guess just last night or whatever, I had gotten on the train and I ended up on this 72-hour journey back to Atlanta with a brief stop in overnight sort of in New Orleans. And my emotions were so high on that train, because I didn't really know how to take everything that I had experienced and bring it back to my old life, and I didn't know what that transition was going to be like. I hadn't found anywhere else I wanted to go. Like, you never know when you do something like this, like what kind of fork in the road is this? You don't know how other people are going to change,
right,
as well, So it was really scary this time last year. So yeah, I mean, I would say the essence of who I am did not change, but my belief, kind of renewed my confidence that I can, it's that podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, Glennon Doyle, we can do hard things. And it just kind of reinforced that for me. And it makes the next thing more possible, even quicker in my mind. Like, well, yeah, I could do that. Like right now I'm learning Gaelga, which is the Irish language. And of course, when you're older, you can't learn new languages, right? Well, I'm 6 months into it and I'm learning the language. And my goal now is to become fluent. And within 5 years, I want to be fluent. And that suggests this journey, like maybe now I'll go back to Ireland more than once. And maybe there's an area where Irish is the primary language. Maybe they have learning schools there you can go to for a week. Already I'm like, well, maybe next year I'll woof. I'm not making it to the southwest of Ireland this time. Maybe next year I'll woof in the Dingle Peninsula for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then I'll go to this Gaeltacht school for a week or two or whatever. And, all of a sudden, in New York, just up the Hudson River, they have an Irish immersion weekend.
Oh.
In March. So, there I am emailing Liam, saying, how much is it? Put me on your list. I don't know. I can go down and visit my dad in Mineola, my dad and my stepmom, and then hop on Amtrak and go up to my, Gaelga immersion weekend in March, right after the anniversary of my family on the soil, like all these new directions start to present themselves, new doors open. And I had no intention of learning another language at this age, And now I'm like, well, maybe once you learn Gaelga, that it's not so hard to learn Icelandic and Jamaican patois, that they're kind of related for weird reasons. So I'm like, well, gosh, maybe like you start to imagine things that were not in the plan at all. So
That's great.
And now is the time to allow a new direction. I mean, and like you're searching for a new farm, a new future. You're very attracted to the farm to table, the education aspects. There's a farm, it's called Crown Hill Farm. It's up by Buffalo.
Oh,
if
I was
you
just
are
in the Buffalo area. I was,
oh, really?
because I went to bring Anna back and then I went up to Niagara
Right.
Falls and yep. Oh, so
Well, I can tell you, they have a really, it's run by a woman. She's got a whole big fiber arts thing happening, and they're a woof location.
Okay, excellent.
You could go up and woof for a week and then go to Geneseo.
All right. Well, I'm going to look them up. Excellent.
I get no commissions for recruiting people.
It's all good. Did you know you were writing the book when you went into this? Like, did you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a professional writer. That's my background.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think, like, for a writer, if something happens and you don't write about it, did it really happen? Yeah, I knew it, but I was blogging along the way, and I thought I have one book. I have some previous books. I have one book a collection of blog posts. And I thought this one might be the same. It would just be sort of this collection of blog posts throughout the journey. And when I came back, I compiled it and it came out to about 50,000 words. So again, it's amazing how these things add up, but I decided it was horrible. Like it just wasn't working. Like they were great. They were fine as blog posts, but it didn't work at all as a book because the lessons and things I had learned and the way things tied back and, just knowing the way the book is constructed now is very different. So I literally, threw out the whole 50,000 words and went back to page one. And that was kind of a heartbreaking day because it's just, it's a lot of work. And
I can imagine.
Yeah. And it's also like, why am I doing this? Where is this going? So the fact that we can sit here today and talk about it is really gratifying for me because, I don't know who I'm reaching and I don't know if, what the ripple effect of the sweatshirt or the oranges or
right. all
the duck, all the smiles, you don't know, you often never hear, but you do it anyway, just do it anyway. I'm so grateful, to meet you. So many similarities, and we'll be woofing together.
Yeah. I just want to end with one of my favorite quotes in your book, and you said it kind of throughout the book. Trust the journey. We may never pass this way again. That's impactful.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, I don't mean to be. I don't see this as morbid, so I apologize to anyone who's hearing this message in that way, but. I'm of the age where when people are dying around me, they're not dying young. We're too old to die young at this point. And I don't take it for granted when I get up each day. And it does help to make what I'm experiencing really feel, super special and make me want to be fully present, in those moments. So I'm really grateful for it. Yeah. And I continue to trust the journey. That's the tattoo I got when I got home.
Yes, so, I remember.
It's so fun. I mean, for me who never had a tattoo and blah, blah, blah. And, my family's like, oh, what tattoo are you going to get after the next trip? I'm like, okay, I guess I'll get
That's funny. Well, let's see what comes out of Ireland.
Check back in 10 years. I'm going to be covered. Yeah.
That's funny. Pattie, it's been such a pleasure. I was really looking forward to, I wanted to make sure I read the book fully. I hate when you read a good book and then you're done with it and you're like looking like, oh, I don't have anything more to read in that book. Like, where's the next one? But thank you. This is, it's been a pleasure and I appreciate you taking the time. And I'm so excited to hear about the next journey.
Well, I look forward to circling back and I appreciate greatly that you provided this opportunity for us to talk and for reading the book. And I'll send you the link about that farm up by Buffalo. And I love following your podcast. Love it. Absolutely love it. I've been listening to I've listened to all of them. So.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. As we are learning from many of our farmers and entrepreneurs, strong connections help propel our visions. Through my interview with Lisa Chase from the University of Vermont Extension and Vermont Tourism Research Center, I was connected to an exciting and new organization called the Global Agritourism Network, or GAN for short. The global network is made up of agritourism stakeholders from around the world. They include farmers and ranchers, researchers, educators, community planners, policymakers, agricultural service providers, and tour operators, among others. It is currently free to join, so if you have any interest in agritourism, check them out at agritourism.eurac.edu/GAN, or just Google Global Agritourism Network. The link will be in our show notes as well. You never know, this global network may help you take your agritourism vision to the next level.